Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about my thoughts on the MCU films and exactly where I would rank every single one of them. Now, I won't be talking about anything that is non-MCU specifically, so like things that were made outside of the MCU, so no shows at all, regardless of whether they're Disney Plus or Defenders or any of the Hulu shows either. And then similarly, in terms of films, nothing like the Spider-Man films from Tobey or Andrew, nothing like the Fox films or the X-Men or the Fantastic Four. None of that's going to be in this video, but I will say those do also have, special spots in my heart for different films, and potentially I could do a larger one later on down the line that includes every Marvel film that I've watched. But that being said, for this film in particular, we're just going to be sticking to the Marvel films in terms of the order in which they were released. So we're going to be starting off with the Iron Man film and then moving on all the way down to No Way Home. That being said, if you have not watched any of these films, there are definitely going to be spoilers, so if you do not want to get spoiled, click off the video, watch those movies, then maybe come back afterwards. And that's going to be the only warning here, because it's kind of obvious that if I'm ranking all of these, I'm going to be talking about every single film. That being said, let's get into the ranking. So, as I said a second ago, we are starting off with the first Iron Man film. This movie has a good place, or a special place rather, in my heart, because it is the first Iron Man film, the first film in the MCU, and I love Robert Downey Jr. in this role. This is pretty much, I think, the only film that I know him from, apart from, I think the film is Tropic Thunder that I've also seen him in, but I really know him from the MCU, and I don't think I've really seen him in anything else. And I do know that he was a pretty prominent actor before the MCU, but this was his kind of return to the spotlight in a sense. And I'm not going to go into why or things like that. You can look into that yourself. But I do really enjoy this film. I loved watching it in theaters. It was a very different superhero film to me, and it was kind of like the start of a new age for superhero films. That being said, I will have to put this in the A slot for now. I am not sure if these are going to move around, but they have the potential to move around over time. So as of now, Iron Man is going to go in the A slot, but we'll see how things go. If I find that, it might have to drop down a tier, but we'll see. I think as of now, it's going to sit in the A tier for the start. And also, I'm going to be trying to order them in terms of which ones I like more in each row as well. So I'll have a general layout of my complete priority. Generally speaking, we have A to F. I would have added S tier here, which I think could fit as well, but I already put a lot of effort in making this thing, and then I realized I missed S tier, but we're just gonna be okay with that for now. That being said, the next film is the Hulk film, and when I was younger, I really liked this film. But that being said, over time, I know it's not as good as a film as most of the things here, but I definitely think that there are worse films on this list. Now, I enjoy the fight in Harlem. I enjoy there are a couple of cool scenes in this series that I really like, but unfortunately, as of now, there aren't any payoffs with the things that they set up. So, for example, the things I think the Thinker is who he's called, the guy with the really big head who's also green, but he started off as being, I think, Mr. Blue or something in that film, and I'm surprised that I actually remember that, because I think I only saw this film once or twice 10 years ago. I never watched this in theaters at all, but I found out about it later on down the line. I didn't know it was an MCU film initially, but it is. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing really more I have to say on this, because it's just not a film that I remember that much or am that fond of, but at the same time, there are a couple of cool things that I liked, specifically the fight in Harlem at the end, and I do think that there are worse films. Next, we have Iron Man 2. Now, this film I think of as slightly a disappointment to me looking back. It was nowhere near to me as entertaining as the first Iron Man film, and I think for that reason I'm going to leave it as D. I don't really want or have much to say in terms of this film at the moment. I didn't love Whiplash in that film. I believe that they could have done a better job, maybe a different villain, but like Whiplash just wasn't all that interesting to me. And apart from maybe the beginning scene where Whiplash comes about, I think that this isn't as good a film. Also, the whole android thing, I just didn't think was a great plot point. I didn't really understand his motivations, and perhaps like I know he wanted revenge on Stark because like his father worked with him or something like that. Apart from that, I don't really think that there's much more to say on this film. So I'm going to leave it in D for now. So next we have the Thor film. And I really enjoyed this film when it initially came out. I actually found it a lot of fun. And the thing is, now looking back, it's not as good as I originally loved it or liked it to be, and there are a couple of flaws, or it's not as entertaining as I'd originally hoped. But that being said, it has a lot of fun scenes in it and introduces us to Loki, who I really, really love as a character. And the scene that Loki finds out he's a frost giant and talks to Odin, the scene where Thor is running into the shield base and trying to steal back his hammer. Those key moments are a lot of fun, which makes me know that it's better than Iron Man 2, but not necessarily on the level of Iron Man in my brain. So as such, I'm going to leave this as C tier for now. And that being said, these will probably move a bit as I add more films and think more about which ones are better and stuff like that. Next, we have a film that I didn't find particularly enjoyable both in theaters and out, and that is the first Captain America film. Now, this film, I would say, and I would describe this film as boring. I don't necessarily think it's a bad film, I just found it boring. And as a result, I can't, in good conscience, put this in a higher tier position than E, because I think, looking back, I would probably find more entertainment watching the Hulk film than Captain America, so it's going to have to go even further at the bottom of this list in terms of all the Phase 1 films. To end off Phase 1, we of course have the first Avengers movie, and this was, as of up till all the films up until this point, this is the best film that I had seen in the MCU. It is also my favorite film experience up until that point, because I went to go see this film at a local theater, but like not the one in my town. It was a nicer theater than the one that I normally go to. It was something that I never knew I wanted, because no one had ever really done something like this before, and we had a connected universe in which all of these movies were tying together and building up to a bigger event, which was the Avengers. And I, like most people, just found this to be awesome to see. And so this is also going to be A tier, and it's actually going to take the number 1 slot up until this point. So let's make some room there for the Avengers, and it'll just slide right there. Next, we have Iron Man 3, and I think that this is actually a film that I need to rewatch, because I think it's a lot better than what I remember. And what I remember it being was very different from some of the previous Iron Man films that I had seen, but at the same time, it talked about topics that I think are actually very interesting, which are things like mental health and trauma and stuff like that. And I think that's also, relating to a lot of the good points that I have for the current Disney Plus shows, which is the way that they're dealing with pain and how the characters have to work through those things. And so I think I'm going to leave this as B tier, but I do think that this will end up maybe at the bottom of B tier for me. And I leave it here because I think it has a lot more than what I initially thought it was. And that's probably because I was very young, not really thinking too deeply into these films. But now looking back, I think it's a lot better than I remember. And hopefully that'll continue to be the case if I rewatch this film, because I do want to rewatch all of the Marvel films at some point soon. I just haven't gotten around to it just yet. But as of now, I think that this would be a low B tier film. Next, we have what is going to be the worst film here, and that is Thor: The Dark World. I mean, I don't know if I really have to explain myself here, but like the film isn't great. Loki's fun in the film. Frigga dies. Odin's just kind of being an ass the whole film. Like he's being a lot more meh the entire time, which, you know, it's because his wife just got killed or whatever. But like, I don't know. I just didn't love Odin as much in this film. I still liked Loki. But I think that there was something missing here, and I didn't really care too much for the film overall, just like pretty much everyone. All right, now we have another top tier film, and this is the film that made me really like Captain America, and I think this is one of the top films within the MCU. I think that this might take up the top spot right now, and it's really sad because I really want the first Avengers to have like the top spot for a while, but I do think Captain America Winter Soldier takes the cake because it just does so much to change fundamentally this world, even more so than the Avengers did. I mean, all of these films kind of take place before the Avengers in their own little pockets. But this one is a Captain America film that also fundamentally alters the entirety of the MCU. And I like that that's the way that they go about using the Captain America films. Everyone else's solo films, you know, they're cool, they do fun things, but like Captain America's films fundamentally alter the landscape. And I really love that. And this is what shot up Captain America in my eyes to be a much more interesting character. So I will leave this here for now. And I know there are films that are going to take the top spot soon, so we'll just leave it there. Guardians of the Galaxy. I am putting this in B tier right away. And that is because this is such a fun and different film that it's mind-blowing to me in terms of how different this film is from everything that came before, and yet you are invested in the characters and you care, even though these are new characters, whereas previously we'd just been dealing with, you know, pretty much the core Avenger characters and their supporting cast. Next, we have Age of Ultron. I did not love this film. I'm going to put it in D tier for now, and I put it in D tier because there are scenes in this film that I enjoy more than what's below it. And actually, it might be better than Iron Man 2 for me. And that's simply because of the introduction of Scarlet Witch and Pietro, even though they kill Pietro, unfortunately, right away at the end of that film. And I really love Scarlet Witch in the MCU. This film does a good job of introducing her, and then also Clint in this film is a lot of fun. He's just a dude. The backstory that we get from him as well just adds so much more to his character. The fight between Hulk as well as Iron Man is a lot of fun. And then also the scene where Bruce Banner says, "I could choke the life out of you and never change a shade." Like this movie has a ton of cool stuff. And then of course the scene where they're all playing around and trying to pick up Thor's hammer and Cap nudges it. It's like this is what this is all about. This is why I really enjoyed that film, but overall, I didn't love the actual story. I don't think they did a great job with Ultron as a villain, and so I'm going to leave this in D tier for now. Next, we have Ant-Man. Ant-Man, I think, changed the game in a lot of ways. I feel like a lot of people, or a good amount of people, don't love Ant-Man, the films, and I disagree. I really enjoyed this because, again, it was something completely different from the MCU, and I like it when they do that. I mean, all of these are action-esque films, but this one is actually a heist movie. Guardians of the Galaxy is just a band of misfits film, and so those two have a decent place in my heart in terms of just doing something completely new with the genre. And so I'm going to leave this in B tier. But I'm going to leave some space in B tier because I think some things are going to have to shift between A and B very soon. Now, Civil War, I must confess, I don't really remember Civil War, and when I initially watched it, I didn't enjoy Zemo in the film, and perhaps it was because I was more used to not really having to think too deeply about what was going on. But I do think that this film does some cool things, and I think it's better than Iron Man 3 in my mind, so I'm going to leave it right behind Ant-Man. And this is my opinion. Like, you can roast me in the comments for this, but I think that Ant-Man's a better film than that. But perhaps if I watch it again, I'll change my mind. It's very possible. I haven't watched or rewatched a lot of these films in so long, so it's something that I need to think about a little bit more. Maybe at the end of the year, at the end of this year, I'll do another ranking and see where things change up. But that being said, let's go to Doctor Strange. Now, Doctor Strange was a lot of fun for me. I think he was cool, but looking back, the villain's not great. It's just a mustache twirling villain, and they have no actual motivations. We don't really see too much of Dormammu in the film, which Dormammu's kind of like he's this extra dimensional creature that just wants to take over. I think the multiverse is essentially what he's trying to take over. And at this point in time, there's no multiverse really. So I guess he's just trying to take over our universe. And so it's okay. It's a decent film. I really like the character of Doctor Strange, so I'm going to keep this in C tier for now. Next, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I don't love this film. I really don't. It's okay. It exists. I would rewatch it, but it's not it doesn't have anything on the original film. And it just seems like the jokes are less funny, the film overall is just not as good, and so I'm hoping that the third film redeems this franchise a little bit for me. Not that it's horrible, but it's not my favorite anymore. Guardians of the Galaxy is such a cool crew to me. They're the Space Avengers, and it's a lot of fun. And apart from the actual Avengers, this is the team that you really enjoy watching. And I think that this film was a disappointment to me because I think I had more expectations than what was actually delivered, and as a result, it's gonna stay in D tier for me. I think that Age of Ultron does a better job than this film. Now we have Spider-Man: Homecoming. This film is gonna go directly into B tier, and it's gonna go top of B tier because I love Spider-Man. Spider-Man is the hero I grew up with Tobey, later a little bit with Andrew, and then with Tom, and it was so fun to see Spider-Man on my screen again, but also hanging out with Iron Man. And that's what I love about this film. It's not really the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that we all know, even though he is at the beginning, and I would say this is the closest to the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that we get in this franchise up until now, and that's why it's so high on my list. But also he's Iron Man's pet project as well, so he's not really the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's not doing everything on his own, but that being said, I still love it so much. I think Tom Holland did a wonderful job in this film portraying a fresh and new Peter Parker. That being said, Flash Thompson, this is the worst interpretation of Flash Thompson that I have ever seen in my life. This character has no potential at all, and I'm glad that he's gone. The MCU ruined Flash Thompson, and they did some horrible jokes with him where he's making fun of Peter, and they're not even funny jokes. They're just low blow jokes, which has to put this movie in B tier. The failure of Flash Thompson in this film in terms of how he was written is really what does it for me, because Flash isn't really a bully. He's just kind of annoying, and he's just kind of there, and it's stupid. I don't like Flash. After reading the first volume of Spider-Man created by Stan Lee and understanding the difference in terms of how Peter Parker is in there versus here, this Peter Parker does a very good job because he's intelligent, but he's also he's not unpopular. And that's something that a lot of earlier renditions did in terms of the films with, like, specifically with Toby. They made him unpopular, which, you know, isn't a bad thing, but it's like, yes, Flash and the other kids, like, they make fun of him, but it's not like they don't want to hang out with him or anything. It's that he's like just he's a brainy kid, so like he's not always interested in hanging out with the jocks, right? And it's like it's different. It's not necessarily just that they're making fun of him just cuz. And so here it's like this isn't an interesting Flash Thompson, and he has no emotional tie to Peter Parker. And so like the failure of Flash, we don't even know if they were childhood friends. Like we don't know the relationship. Is he just the bully? Is he just like a rude person that like is just there because he's Flash Thompson? Because the other two films did that, or the other two franchises did that, but The Amazing Spider-Man actually did a decent job of making him more of a character and have a potential route there. That being said, we're never getting Agent Venom because of this version of Flash. Now, I know I'm ranting a little bit about Flash Thompson, but it's like Flash, like this version of Flash will never be a war veteran. He will never be Agent Venom. Like it's not going to happen. He's not going to join the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like none of that potential is there with this character because I don't want him. I don't want this particular version of the Flash moving forward because he's not interesting and the MCU didn't do anything useful with him. And that's one of the things that pisses me off about the Spider-Man franchise. It's not about Peter Parker. It's not about Spider-Man. I think they do a wonderful job there. I love Ned Leeds because it's a step away from the Harry Osborn effect, even though he also has the potential to become, I believe, the Hobgoblin. I think I mentioned this previously. I don't remember it. He's either the Hobgoblin or like the Jackal, one of those. And so there's that, and then the weird thing with Zendaya, like I love Zendaya and Tom being a couple throughout these films. I think it works very well. The weird thing is that they made her MJ. Just like leave her as Michelle. There's no reason to make her MJ apart from just cuz. I think that was just literally thrown in there at the end for fun and to be annoying to fans. There was no reason to do that. They didn't have to. Like Spider-Man has many different love interests over the years, and if you really wanted to, you could pick another name out of the hat, but like there's probably some brunette out there that you could use as the person and it would have been fine, or like whatever. I just feel like you could have used a different love interest as opposed to the ones that have already been done, and there was no need to do this again. That being said, I still love the two together. So yeah, this is a B tier film. It's time for Ragnarok. This is going at the top of A right now, and the problem right now that I'm running into is that these films are very much in A and B right now, so I'll probably have to shift some of these down in a second to make room for the other films, because I don't want everything to just sit in A tier, because there are films that are just above the rest, and I know that they're coming up, so I might have to do something here. So let's rearrange for a second and reset before moving forward, but first let's put in Black Panther. So Black Panther, for me, I'm going to put it in the top side of B tier. And the reason I put it here is because I think that Black Panther is such a positive film in terms of what it does culturally that it deserves to be here. And also, I think the film is pretty solid. The reason it's not higher up on the list is because the film, to me, feels rushed in terms of the overall story. I think that Black Panther could have worked a lot better if it was split into two parts. If it was Black Panther 1 and Black Panther 2, and at the end of Black Panther 1 he fails and he's probably dead, and then in a post-credit scene you see that he's still alive. And I think that would have worked much better than what they had here, but I think that they rushed it because they needed Black Panther in Infinity War, and it feels rushed to me in that sense. I like Killmonger as a villain, I like T'Challa, I like pretty much all the characters, and I like the agent character just because he's kind of like us, the viewer, being introduced to this world. I like it when movies have those types of characters, and those characters exist for us, the viewer. And so I think it's a good film, but it does have some pitfalls in my eyes because it feels rushed, and I think it actually is. Like, I would have to actually talk to people that know more. It feels like this film did everything that it did simply because Infinity War was the next film in the lineup and needed Black Panther in that film. If that film was maybe another year or two away, I think we could have gotten like 2 Black Panther films and then moved into Infinity War, and I think it would have worked a lot better. That being said, it's still an enjoyable time. I still like the overarching story, and so I'm leaving it here in B tier. Alright, so we have the Avengers Infinity War film. This is one of my favorite movies within the MCU, and it's going to be at the top. It's going to be at the top. It has to be at the top right now. There might be one film that comes above it right now, but as of this moment, it's at the top. This is for obvious reasons. This film is absolutely fantastic. I mean, we have Thanos traveling around, grabbing the Infinity Gauntlet, grabbing all of the Infinity Stones. We're trying to save Vision. People die. Everyone dies at the end of this film. I mean, I cried during this film, and I think up until this point, this is the first MCU film that I cried during. It was just so phenomenal to see. And so it is A. It is A, and it is top tier right now. Next, we're going to go to Ant-Man and the Wasp. This is just going to go to E. Actually, you know what? It has to go to F. Honestly, it's going to F tier. Like, this was just not a fun film for me. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was well made. I didn't think it was... The story wasn't entertaining to me as much as the original film, and so it felt like a huge disappointment to me. So I have to put that in F tier for now. And so... yeah, that's just kind of how it goes. I mean, I really like the characters in that film, and I think it's cool generally, but like Ghost was such a boring villain. The whole like giant man or Goliath storyline I didn't really care for, and then I did like the idea that they were saving the mom and everything. That part was cool. Overall, nothing too crazy. I mean, it was not a great film to me, and I don't really need to rewatch it. If I'm rewatching everything, I will rewatch it, but like on its own, I would never want to rewatch the Ant-Man and the Wasp film. Captain Marvel. I liked this film even less than Ant-Man and the Wasp. This is like one of the biggest disappointment films to me, and this is such a huge disappointment because I really wanted this film to succeed. Like, so badly I wanted this film to succeed because I think that, you know, having a female lead in a Marvel film is a cool idea. It can be done well. And they just brought in the most boring character in the world, and I think that it was just that they wrote this character to be so boring. And up until this point, I have no reason to believe that Captain Marvel has a legitimate personality apart from I'm here and I will do things. She's just super strong. That's her entire personality, and the entire film is kind of boring and unnecessary, and it felt like a trick to try and get you to watch a movie before Endgame. Like, that's the entire thing. It was, watch this film before Endgame because it's actually useful, and she's not in Endgame really at all. She's not a pivotal character at all, and so it's like, it felt boring. And then also, the origin of the eye patch for Fury, it wasn't even good. It wasn't even good. It was a cat. It was a space cat. He should have had to fight a Skrull and lose his eye. It would have been so much cooler. I mean, it would have been so much cooler. And the idea that it's like, that's why you don't trust people because a cat attacked you? Like, really? Really? It's not a good story element. And it's not fun. And Captain Marvel, like, her backstory is like, meh. I don't care that the title Avenger was listed on the side of her plane. Like, it's not interesting. It's not interesting. It's like, this character isn't fun, and then you're just going to be like, yeah, the Avengers name came from her, and then there's no acknowledgement of that in Endgame at all. Like, she meets the Avengers, and she just doesn't say anything. She's like, she has all her memories back. If it was actually interesting or important or useful, like, it should have been brought up. So I don't like this film. It's not fun, and it's a huge disappointment to me. It's one of the biggest disappointments in terms of a Marvel film for me. The only one that I like less is Thor Ragnarok Thor the Dark World, because it's just a boring story. It's a less interesting story. Like, Captain Marvel has a somewhat potentially interesting story, but like, it's not executed well. They didn't give anything to Brie Larson. I believe that she could have done a wonderful and phenomenal job in this role, but they made her into like a robot essentially in terms of how she acts, and I don't like it. Anyway, let's move on because I don't like ranting about these films that I don't love as much for too long. Avengers Endgame. So I'm going to leave this at the top of B tier because I don't like the story is okay. The story is okay, but the important thing here is that this film is the home run of home runs for the MCU up until this point. It is the end of the Infinity Saga. It is the bookend, but it is nothing close to as good as the films above it. I mean, the only one that you could maybe argue would be like the Avengers, but that holds a special place in my heart. It's not going below A tier for me. And so Endgame is like, it's cool. It has a lot of fun scenes, but also a lot of things that you're like, if you question this, you're going to be confused. So this film doesn't work as well on its own after watching everything. It's like, there are things that are confusing about this film if you think about it too deeply, and so it has to stay in B tier. But I still love it. It's still a fun film. It's just I was disappointed walking out of this film because I was expecting Infinity War or like a to be toppled, right? A film better than Infinity War is what I was working on seeing, what I was expecting to see, and you just can't live to that hype. You can't. You come out with some really good films, but like you can't expect every film to be as top tier as the ones in the A list right now. Next, we have Far From Home. This is like the weakest Spider-Man film, but I think it's still pretty good. So I'm going to leave this at the top of C tier. And I don't really have much to say here. I liked Quentin Beck. I liked Mysterio. This whole plot line is pretty interesting to see. I mean, as just about everyone who knows anything about Spider-Man, knew that Mysterio was going to be the villain. And I thought that this was going to be the introduction of the multiverse, but it wasn't really. That's okay. I still liked it. It was a lot of fun. Black Widow. Black Widow has to go into D tier. And I'm going to put this not at the complete bottom of D tier, but it's pretty low in D tier. And this is because this film is wasted potential to me. This film should have taken place at the time that Captain Marvel was taking place. It should have actually taken place several years before that. And it should have been a much different story. I think the story is okay, but what should have happened and what I wished we got was the story of Hawkeye and Nat meeting through the perspective of Black Widow, or even in replacement of that, maybe a Hawkeye film that like followed the two of them, or like a joint film like Hawkeye and Black Widow, because they're the two spies, they're friends, things like that, showing their meeting of one another, that initial interaction, that entire story, and they allude to it, and I'm like, this is the story I actually want to watch. Why are you not showing it to me? I want to see that. And so that's why it's a huge one of the big reasons why it's a disappointment. The other reason is they brought in Taskmaster. I don't care that Taskmaster is a girl. No one cares. No one cares at all about that. I mean, it's not, it doesn't add anything entertaining to the story, but this characterization overall destroys this character. And that's because this character is not even remotely interesting to see on screen, because he doesn't talk, he doesn't do anything apart from fight, and she is literally a drone. And the tie to Black Widow, don't care, not interesting. It's boring. It's not. It comes out of nowhere, and it's just like, oh, let's add a fun little tie, but she's not actually even the villain, and so it's not fun. This is like a failed Winter Soldier film to me. And I love the family aspect of it. That's why it's here and in D list and not further down. I love the family. I love the introduction of Yelena and Red Guardian and the older Black Widow, whose name I'm blanking on. But I love that part of the film. I loved the start and how they don't just have exposition at the beginning and tell you, oh, Red Guardian is a super soldier or whatever, but it's a failed film because you know Black Widow is going to survive, so there's no tension there. These are all brand new characters, so is it really going to be a big deal if they die? Not really. But, like, you know, most likely, most of them aren't going to die. You know, at the very least, Yelena is not dying because she's going to be the next Black Widow. It's pretty obvious that they're doing that. And then, so there's no tension in this film at all. Also, the idea that of all the Avengers, Black Widow, who's literally just a normal person, is going to survive a free-falling, like, city, essentially, like, it doesn't work. Like, that's Fast and Furious levels of logic, and it's like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me, and this is a film that I really, really wanted to be phenomenal. This is a film that I wanted to hit top tier, or at least B tier or A tier, but it just doesn't. It falls short in so many ways, and it's just sad because there's so much potential here, and the characters are fun and interesting. It's just the villains are absolutely mustache-twirling, boring-ass villains that you don't want to see ever again, and I hope they just don't use Taskmaster again because she's so boring. And also, the idea that Taskmaster in this film is actually literally just played by a dude. There's a dude under that suit, and this is known. And the only reason why Taskmaster is a female in this film is for shock value. That's all that it is. And she doesn't have a female build because it's a dude under the suit, and she doesn't have a personality. Her powers are more boring than they originally were. It's so bizarre as to why they put in Taskmaster, especially because of all the characters they could bring in. A lot more people know about Taskmaster. A lot more people know more than I do about Taskmaster because I don't play the video games. I've seen him in a couple TV shows, like animated shows in the past, but like people like this character as a Spider-Man villain, and they like this character generally through video games that they've played. So people know who this character is, and it's just a disappointment. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next film, and this is Shang-Chi. This is a film that I really wanted to do well, and I think it does a decent job. Now, I think that this film actually goes above in B tier, and I think that it would be like middle of B tier right now. I think it's better than Black Panther. It has a solid story. It's a lot of fun. And I just think it's really, really good. And also, like, the representation and everything works well with the story because it takes place not completely in the US. It travels around a bit, and you have like different pieces of the puzzle. You go and visit the Mandarin's hideout. You go and see the ancient city, which Shang-Chi is related to, and so it makes sense why the diversity is there, which is what I love to see. I love to see diversity when it makes sense, right? Having diversity just for the sake of diversity never works, and typically it takes away from the story. But when it works and fits in perfectly with the film, it's amazing. And that's what this film is. It is a lot of fun. It's amazing. This is one of the best. This is one of the top tier films in the MCU, I think, and that's why it deserves to be in B tier. The films below this are not as good, I think. Maybe Civil War has the potential to rise back up above it if I rewatch it and think about it. But I think that this is a decent and well done film. It also has like a feel of an older style kung fu film while also being modernized at the same time. It's just a lot of fun. The only downside to this is that the Mandarin dies at the end, which I think is a trope that is happening too much in the MCU. Less villains need to just die at the end because it takes away from the world building and also takes away from the heroic aspect of the characters. I think that more of the time the heroes need to actually be able to save the villains. Finally, we have the worst film in the MCU, and that is The Eternals. It is just trash. And I'm not going to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this film because I hate this film so much. It's so boring. It is the most boring Marvel film I've ever seen in my entire life. It has the blandest characters who are literally just robots and have no actual personality, and none of the backstory is properly explored. The timeline is not interesting. The timeline in this film is just stupid. There's no reason for it, and they skip all the interesting aspects of the character that could potentially be shown in the time skip between the past and the modern day. They skip all the stuff in which people were actually doing that could have actually been fun. And so it's stupid. It's a stupid film. The characters are boring. I don't care about any of them, and the deviants are wasted here because they also don't do anything useful. They're just a side plot, basically, and it's the entire film is literally just, let's get the crew back together, and then we're gonna fight a different villain from what we thought we were fighting the entire time, and it's stupid. It's not a good film. It's so boring. Icarus flies into the sun and just kills himself for no reason, apart from, like, copying Greek mythology that one time because it's a made-up story that one of them made up anyway, so it's stupid. It's absolute garbage, and I hate this film. I do not like this film, and honestly, if I rewatch the MCU films, I'd probably skip it. Like, this is the film that I would probably skip because it pisses me off so much because it's so stupid. Let us jump in to the last film on this list, and that is Spider-Man No Way Home. This film, the best film of 2021 that I've seen. One of my favorite moments in my life, honestly, is watching this film because of the three Spider-Man. This film is so phenomenal in my eyes. It is second only to Infinity War because they do essentially the same thing. These are like films that are being built up over years and years and years, and the films that feel like in this category of, you know, huge build up and payoff are Infinity War, No Way Home, and Endgame. And that being said, Endgame is not as good as these two films. And so Spider-Man No Way Home, I think it's going to take the second slot right now because I do believe that Infinity War is a little bit better because I was crying a lot in that film. In Spider-Man No Way Home, I had one tear the entire film, but it was still phenomenal, and I loved it so much. And so it has to be second place right here. So let's go through the actual list and just list off everything here. Alright, so let's list off the entirety of the MCU films in this list from top to bottom. So we start off and we have Infinity War, then we have No Way Home, Ragnarok, Winter Soldier, and then the Avengers. That's all A tier. B tier starts off with Endgame, then Iron Man, then Spider-Man Homecoming, then we have Shang-Chi, then we have Black Panther, and then Guardians of the Galaxy. C tier starts off with Far From Home, we got Ant-Man, Civil War, Iron Man 3, and Doctor Strange. D tier is Thor, we got Age of Ultron, Black Widow, and Volume 2 of Guardians of the Galaxy. Then we have in Group E, we have Iron Man 2, Hulk, and Captain America. And then finally in F tier, the bottom of the barrel, we got Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, Thor the Dark World, and then finally the worst film in the MCU by far, Eternals. So yeah, that is all I have to say for this video. Let me know your thoughts on my ranking in the comments below. If you agreed, what you think is like absolutely absurd in terms of my opinions, please let me know. I'm very curious to see what you guys think of this ranking. That being said, if you want to see more from me on this channel, please subscribe to this channel, like the video if you enjoyed, and as always, I will see you next time. Have a wonderful day. Bye.